were you on a GSXR 1000 or was it prior to that? Were you on like
No, so
I can't
the
remember.
first year in 2001, the first year in 2001, it was the GSXR 750, so the old school like SRAD bike. So it had like the big, massive like tail section, huge tank, and
Yeah.
then
Uh,
that was 2000. Sorry,
A giant
2000.
egg
That was
shape. It was like an egg.
yeah, big egg shape, like tail section, and all of
Right.
that, which was quite funny. Big mouth. I mean, that thing was like whoa, like a big boat,
Like a tank. Yeah.
Yeah, huge,
Yeah.
massive
The
tank,
gas
and then
tanks was like, I mean, it's like a coffee table, right? Like
yeah,
this thing's
exactly. It was
humongous.
like
Like by today's standards, the bikes back then were ginormous.
yeah, I could be, as life went on and I became older, could say it's like riding in something else, but it's not. Those things were massive, but
Yeah.
that yeah, the next year was when they actually brought out a whole redesigned Suzuki, which never much it didn't change much from the design that
Oh, 100%.
the one that they initially brought out then in 2001. It was the complete change. Like everything was far more aerodynamic and
Right. Still had a
yeah,
huge
it
gas
was
tank though.
yeah, it was still quite bigger, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was far more like aerodynamic and yeah, it was a good bike. I mean, yeah, it was the GS6R. I believe it was the GS6R 1000 that year, and then
Yeah.
it was funny because yeah, it was thing wasn't that far off of what super bikes were running in that class in Formula Extreme. It was only just small kind of electronics and things that
Right.
changed between Formula Extreme and what was Superbike.
So, I mean, I don't know what kind of power numbers the bikes were making back then, Formula Extreme bikes and stuff. And I'm pretty sure the electronics weren't super advanced, right?
No,
Like
no,
2020,
hardly.
like your electronics are like right hand mostly, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, guaranteed. Yeah,
So how
it
do
was.
you like walk me through the what you felt like when that's your experience. You raced at Willow. You did nationals for a couple years on basically production bikes, and then next thing you know, you're overseas, like throwing a leg over a two-stroke GP bike, dude. Like like
Yeah,
a
no, it was
500 two-stroke, dude. Like
yeah, it was a big jump. No, that was a huge highlight in my career, man, being able to get a season. Obviously, 12, 13. Once I made that switch to road racing, my focus started to change a lot more
yeah,
on watching MotoGP and 500cc World Championship. So
right.
and it was cool, that's what my heroes were riding at the time. So obviously everything was switching to four stroke, and I just wanted everyone had always spoke about how insane the 500cc two strokes were, and how
Right.
legendary of bikes they were and
Yeah.
everything. So to have that opportunity to be able to race one for a season and successfully race it as well
Yeah.
was huge. I mean, massive highlight in my career. But I mean, yeah, the jump was unheard of. I mean, it's
Right.
you just there's no way you would
I mean, think
see
about that
something like
nowadays,
that
right?
today. Like, yeah, I mean, it just basically super sport,
Right.
yeah, just complete secondary class like super sport
Yeah.
racing, and then making the jump directly up to the pinnacle of the sport,
Yeah.
into and on what most people classified as like the most vicious, wild, like
Yeah.
insane bike there ever was, with those things. But yeah, I mean, it bit me, like it bit me a punch
Huh.
getting used to that power band. There
You
were a
learned how
lot of
gnarly
times.
the 500 it really was
Yeah, the high
firsthand.
sides were intense. I mean, when that power band kicked in and that thing would high side you to the moon, it would put you a step back or two. But
Yeah.
no, I was always good at being able to kind of tune that out and get back into it, build the confidence again. But
Right.
Yeah, it was a big step. I mean, it was funny. I had every single because I'd won the two championships back to back for Suzuki.
Yeah.
Suzuki were always my favorite brand growing up. I always because yeah, except for the bikes that didn't make them, but Suzuki was my favorite motocross bike growing up. And yeah, it was cool, man. I won the two championships for him, and then I just expected the natural course to move back up would go to Yoshimura Suzuki Superbike, and
Right.
it was funny. The following season, after I'd won the Formula Extreme Championship in 2001, I had
Yeah.
basically every single manufacturer was offering me a factory superbike ride for the following season,
No shit.
except for
The one you
Yoshimura
wanted.
Suzuki. And honestly,
That's
I
crazy.
if Yoshimura Suzuki were going to offer and had offered then I would have seriously considered probably staying and doing the superbike whole thing. And
Really?
yeah, I mean everything happens for a reason though. And it was funny. I found out years later and stuff that it was the kind of team kind of principal at the time that ran Yoshimura Suzuki, Mal Harris. He was kind of a bigger, chubbier guy, older
Yeah.
guy. But he did not like because I had my ears pierced, I had tattoos, and
Right.
already at that age, and he didn't like my image, and he was just like, nope, nope. Yeah. So
He wanted all American clean cut, and you
yeah,
weren't that.
exactly. So he didn't
Okay.
like my image. He didn't like what I was about, and then yeah. So
Hmm.
and then also like I made the switch, and I had a bunch of people, like all kinds of people, especially Mladen was like, oh, he's going to be terrible. He's going to be a disgrace. He's going to make a joke out of American riders, and
Who's wow, dude.
obviously because he did it at that age at a similar thing, and then made a joke of himself. So
Okay.
he assumed that obviously was going to be the case, and it was funny because it ended up being quite a successful year. Yeah, there was
Yeah.
a couple occasions that I finished top two stroke. Barcelona, like, yeah, that was only mid-season. I ended up putting it on pole position with 2 minutes to go in qualifying. Obviously, four or five other guys ended up jumping ahead of me, but
Right.
still qualified like fifth or sixth on the grid,
Yeah.
which was awesome. Quite a few top 10 finishes. And then, best part about it is I got the factory Suzuki offer to go to factory Suzuki MotoGP that following year. And it was funny because the opening test, which was in Malaysia, was a Suzuki test. And at that test, all the Suzuki were there, all the Suzuki factory team. So at
Right.
that test in Malaysia was Yoshimura Suzuki, and it was cool. So there I was at factory Suzuki MotoGP,
Yeah.
and the Suzuki Superbike team was there, and it was funny because there was a turn three at Malaysia. It's like wide open. You're like going through the gearbox from like first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and you're just
Yeah.
on the edge of the tire spinning it up. And it was funny because I caught him and I was like, "Oh, this is perfect! Like this is the absolute perfect timing." And I ended up catching up to Mladen, and I rode around the outside of him around turn three. And as I was going around, and yeah, those things had like absolutely zero electronics at the time, but I rode around the outside of them, like just spinning the thing, just complete lock, and just put the middle finger up, and like,
Yeah.
and was yeah, it was, and that was like such like after all the bad press he had said about me, like when I was going
Right.
over there, that was like the perfect, you know what? And that
Yeah.
because I never said anything back, because I looked up to the guy when I was growing up and all of
Yeah.
that stuff. So I never said anything in return, but to be able to do that on track and then just like leave him was like that was super cool. That
It was
was
like that was like a win.
yeah, that was a career highlight.